All right. Good morning, everyone. We'll give it a few more moments before we get started. We are still waiting on a few more attendees to come in, so please sit tight. We'll be with you soon. All right. Good morning, everyone. Firstly, we want to thank you for coming into the Policy and NOFO review session for the aid of victims of violence and domestic violence and sexual violence. We look forward to having each and every one of you today. We look forward to discussing all the topics we have planned to discuss with you and look forward to any questions and feedback you may have as we go along. All right. All right, so today, here's going to be our agenda. The first thing on the menu is we're going to meet the GMU team, which is around me and our extended DCFS family with us here in the meeting. We're going to go over some housekeeping and ground rules. Then we'll talk about the SFY 2025 quarterly reports using the health system. We'll talk about the policy, notice of funding opportunity, and the weight scoring matrix, as well as the application process. So first thing we want to do is meet the DCFS GMU team. So we'll go into the next slide here. All right. I want to first introduce each and every one of you to our Deputy Administrator, Lori Ann Molina Lavelle. Lori Ann?
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Xylan. And thank you everyone for attending today. We're grateful for your time and for all you're doing. I'll hand it right back over to you, Xylan.
All right. Thank you, Lori Ann.
Thank you.
Thank you for introducing us to you and welcome to the DCFS family. Next up, I want to introduce everyone to our Chief, Yaraseth Anaya Lugo.
Good morning, everyone. As you know me, I'm Yaraseth Anaya Lugo. I am the chief of the Grants Management Unit, and I work along this great team. Carla?
Good morning, everyone. Carla Delgado, Management Analyst 4 in the Grants Management Unit team. Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Yadira Montes. I'm a Social Services Program Specialist 3 here at the GMU unit.
John Aragon. Michael Guerra.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Michaela Tran, Grants and Projects Analyst 2.
And lastly, I'm Xylan Ladista. I'm the Grants and Projects Analyst 2, and I'm also the point of contact for this funding opportunity. All right, we'll go to the next slide. Now, we're going to discuss, before we get started, some housekeeping and ground rules. These will assist us in ensuring a meaningful meeting and allow us to get through each topic effectively. All right, so here are some of the talking points we're going to go over. We're going to go over some session expectations, teams tools, and teams etiquettes. Some session expectations, so behaviors. We all want to be respectful. I know there's quite a bit of us here on this session today, so we want to be respectful to each other. We want to be attentive. There's quite a bit of information we need to cover, and we want to make sure that every one of you has the information regarding this funding opportunity. And of course, participate. We will have question and answer sessions throughout, so we'd love for you to participate. Accountability, let's have a positive attitude. Let's be willing to learn. And of course, ask for clarification if you have any. Here are some tools for everyone to be able to use. I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with Teams, but here are some basics. At the top of the screen, there are a couple tools. The first one you want to know is the chat. That's the chat where you'll be able to chat with the panel and other participants in the session. The raise hand section is where you will be able to raise your hand and ask questions. The mic icon is where you'll be able to mute and unmute yourself to speak. We do want to note that all the participants are muted upon entry. We ask that you raise your hands during the Q&A session. If you have questions, GMU staff will unlock your mic for you to be able to unmute. Some Teams etiquettes, enter Teams on time, of course, ensure that your systems are running smoothly, minimize interruptions you may have. Actively sitting upright and attentive, that will help ensure that you are able to discern all the information we have. Of course, participate. Let's make sure that we are asking questions that are on topic. Let's open to learn. Use the chat feature, ask on-topic questions, ask for help. Answer some questions that you might see. You can use the emojis for feedback. We do ask that you have a little parking lot, have a sheet of paper or a notepad next to you. During the presentation, wait to ask your questions until the Q&A opportunities. So feel free to write down your questions on the side and we'll be able to get to those questions. All right, the first topic we're going to discuss today is the quarterly reports. I know a lot of you have been asking us, how are we supposed to submit our quarterly reports for the aid for domestic violence and sexual violence victims? We are utilizing the Nevada How Helpful Algorithms and Logarithmics platform to submit your SFY 2025 quarterly report. So subrecipients, you guys, who receive marriage license award, established pursuant to Nevada Revised Statutes NRS 217.400, must complete performance reports on a quarterly basis. We ask that you submit these reports by the 15th of the month following the end of the reporting quarter. We know there has been quite a lot of time since the first, second, and third quarter has ended, so we will discuss on how you'll be submitting these reports. Again, this year's reports will be in an electronic format and there will be two separate reports. One report will be specifically for domestic violence services that your agency provides, and another report will be for sexual violence services that your agency provides. We will be sending out the links to these reports towards the next couple of days. Some of the data that we ask on these reports include demographic data. We all are aware of those demographics, victimization data, special classification in individuals. Then we break it down into direct services. These are the service numbers: victim compensation assistance, personal advocacy and accompaniment, emotional support for safety services, shelter housing services, criminal civil justice system assistance, public presentations, community education, and of course, the progress you have towards your scope of work. This is what the HAL report will look like. Once we have the link out to you, it's again in an electronic form. It's going to give you instructions. It's going to give you prompts. Please make sure that you read through all the instructions on the report and the prompts. A lot of the questions are slightly different than the questions you've had before. So please make sure you take the time to read through those questions, and please make sure you follow the prompts, as some of them will specifically ask that you enter data only for this funding. Okay, and we should have a question and answer session. So if anyone has any questions, go ahead and raise your hand, and our GMU staff will allow you to unmute, and we'll go ahead and respond to questions you may have regarding how. All right, no questions. We'll go ahead and move on to our policy section. So in the policy section, each and every one of you should have received the draft policy for the aid for victims of domestic violence and sexual violence marriage license funding. These are the topics that we will be discussing today regarding the draft policy. So the first one, we're going to talk about policy, the definitions, the purpose of the funding, the eligibility of the funding, our commitment, and our continued commitment with the Commission on Behavioral Health, required application attachments, the grant funding formula that we use, procedure for grant award, and the subrecipient responsibilities. Policy. So we do want to again cite the NRS. So the Division of Child and Family Services is responsible for the administration of the state-funded assistance to victims of domestic violence or sexual violence marriage license funding. This is pursuant to Nevada Revised Statutes, NRS 217-400 to 217-460. Here are some definitions. These definitions are outlined in the draft policy. These just define each specifics, like DCFS means the Division of Child and Family Services, domestic violence as it is defined in NRS 217-400, GMU, our team, the Grants Management Unit, fiscal is the fiscal unit of our division, the State Administrative Manual, or SAM. This is a reference source for Nevada state policies, procedures, requirements, and information. Subrecipient, which is most of you, which is a non-federal entity that receives a sub-award. And of course, the last two, victims of sexual assault and victims of sexual violence, as it is defined in NRS 200.366, and victims of stalking, as it is defined in NRS 200.575. The purpose. The purpose of this program, this funding, is to support programs for victims. This is for nonprofit and public agencies. This is for victims of domestic and sexual violence, as defined in NRS 217-400 to 217-460. This funding is exclusively for shelter and shelter-related services, as it is defined in NRS 217-420. Our goal with this program is to reach underserved populations and regions across the vast array of Nevada. Couple funding details. This award is awarded on a state fiscal year basis, which runs from July 1st to June 30th of each year, and it is administered by DCFS through our application review and regional grant allocation. Eligibility. A lot of us have looked at the eligibility section. So here is the section. So the state of Nevada will fund pursuant to NRS 217-400 to 217-460, not more than one applicant to provide services for victims of domestic violence and one applicant to provide services for victims of sexual violence in counties whose population is less than 100,000, which in this case is all 17 counties in Nevada, with the exception of Clark and Washoe County. And not more than two applicants to provide services for victims of domestic violence and two applicants to provide services for victims of sexual violence in counties whose population is 1,000 or more. So Clark and Washoe County.
Question, do you want to take the question now?
We do see that there is a question, hands raised. We will wait to take questions in our Q&A session. So here are those eligibility requirements once more. This is again outlined in the policy. I just want to hit on some of these eligibility criteria. So of course, the main one is be a nonprofit corporation that is incorporated or qualified in the state. The next one that we are heavily looking into is that you have to be governed by a board of trustees that reflects the local racial, ethnic, and economic social composition of your county, as well as having a trustee who is a victim of domestic or sexual violence. Of course, we have other specific eligibility criteria here regarding services and services that are provided, but those two main ones are the ones that certainly it takes to cake for this funding source. So the Commission on Behavioral Health, DCFS, will submit to the Division of Public and Behavioral Health, DPBH, Commission on Behavioral Health, the total amount awarded each year from the account for the aid for victims of domestic or sexual violence for review. That's the total funding amount that we have available for this upcoming fiscal year, as well as the amount that is allocated to each county and the agencies in those counties. This is new this year. This is a required application attachment. So starting in SFY 2026, our team is requesting the following documents to be attached in your application submission. This list is not exhaustive or limited. We do reserve the ability to change that at the discretion of the team in the next fiscal year or the current fiscal year. So some of these forms, Form 990, which is the return of organization except from income tax. This outlines the funding sources that an agency receives or has accrued in the IRS form for the last tax year. Organizational charts, as we mentioned, we are looking into the board makeup. So we do ask that you include all the personnel for this funding opportunity, as well as your board members, along with the demographic composition of those members, so that we are able to determine that the eligibility is being met. And of course, all the other ones that we normally have, such as resumes, letters of collaboration, memorandums, contracts. This one's new, shelter standards. We'd like to see a copy of your organization's shelter standards, if applicable. Of course, we have the scope of work and the budget narrative. So this is how we determine the funding and the funding allocation for the aid for victims of domestic violence and sexual violence. It starts off with a basic allocation. As defined in NRS, each county who has less than 100,000 in population will receive $7,000 starting off. Then each county who has a population of more than 100,000 will receive $35,000 starting off. We adjust the base each year to account for changes in the total amount deposited into the account. Then we compare to 791,000 as defined in NRS. And then after we provide the base allocation adjustment, we then allocate additionally based on per capita. So this is distributed on a per capita basis for counties with a population of 20,000 or more. So if your county has 20,000 or more in population, you'll receive the base adjustment, and the per capita allocation. Unclaimed allocation. So if there is no county that applies for the specific county that we are looking to get funded, DCFS will engage with nearby counties to cover those unmet areas. We will reach out to all the agencies who apply for this funding once you submit your applications, and we'll see if you are able to cover a county that isn't being covered. If after all of our outreach efforts, there is still no application received for a given county, the funds will go ahead and be returned to our account, and we'll redistribute that funding amongst all the awarded organizations. Of course, we have the distribution requirements, which require that 75% of the funding goes towards services that support victims of domestic violence and 25% of services for victims of sexual violence. We also have a reserve funding. This is a 60-day reserve that is maintained for managing cash flow, addressing unexpected costs, preventing funding disruptions. So we want to ensure that we can keep our programs going and we are able to fund everything. And of course, the weight scoring matrix, which we'll discuss here in a moment. This is for counties over 100,000 in population. This divides the funding allocation into two, programmatic scoring, which evaluates criteria such as shelter capacity, amenities, service quality, budget efficiency, and client feedback. And of course, the service number scoring, which we have gone and used in the past, which assesses the number of individuals who served in 4 categories. And of course, remaining funding, any unspent funds do not revert and may be awarded in subsequent years. So if there are any leftover fundings for this year, we'll go ahead and transfer that for next year. This is the chart of the funding allocation. So we start with the county in the first column, and we start with the population. The population statistics we received from the state demographer on February 5th of this year. That is all the county's populations as of right now. We take the county's population and give you the base award. Again, if your county is under 100,000, you will receive 7,000. If your county is over 100,000, you'll receive 35,000. We have the base adjustment. So this is additional funds to be allocated due to the increase in the account. So each county will have a base adjustment allocation. So for counties with less than 100,000, you are receiving an additional 51,000. For counties with over 100,000, you're receiving 256,000. Then we have another adjustment. The counties over 200,000. There's only a few counties that meet this criteria. If you meet this criteria, you get additional funding. And it shows you all the total awards at the end for each county. In the next slide, we show you the distribution between domestic violence and sexual violence. So 75% of the award for a given county, for example, Carson City, which has 135,000. 75% of that goes towards domestic violence, which is 101,000, and 25% goes into sexual violence, which is 33,000. Here are the procedure that we have with the grant award. Of course, like we mentioned, we first collect the population data from the state demographer. We meet with our DCFS fiscal team to find out the funding projection for the amount of the account this year. And then we have funding recommendations and approval. We provide the administrator with our funding recommendations. The administrator prioritizes offerings based on the broadest range of services at the lowest cost. And of course, awards no more than 1 applicant for domestic violence and 1 applicant for sexual violence in counties with less than 100,000, and 2 for each for counties with over 100,000. Of course, the administrator has the final authority to approve or deny grant applications. We aim to notify you in writing within 45 days of the application deadline, which is the deadline is April 1st. This is new this year, subrecipient responsibilities. This is outlined both in the policy and the NOFO. All awarded subrecipients need to adhere to our GERS requirements, national shelter standards, and programmatic and financial standards. So here are some of those responsibilities again. All right, we will have a brief answer and question session. We have a few hands up, so we will have our staff member go ahead and unmute the hands as they appear.
Can you ask your question? Are you able to ask your question? Do we know who has her hand up?
Melina had her hand up.
Melina, can you hear us?
Yes, I wasn't sure if you were ready for me or somebody else, so.
We're ready.
My question was regarding the purpose statement, back at the beginning. I just had a couple kind of, I guess, questions or want to better understand maybe what the purpose of the purpose statement is, because it in some ways sort of deviates a little bit from the NRS. There's nowhere in the NRS where it mentions anything about public agencies, and I was sort of curious why you added that there. It really, in the NRS, only mentions nonprofit corporations. So I don't know if that's a big concern, but it's just was a question. Should I move on to the other question?
Yeah, our team will go ahead and take a look at that. Go ahead and ask your question and we'll respond to your first question next.
Okay.
Do you want me
So
to answer
then, oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Yara.
Go ahead. Nonprofit agencies and public agencies are the same thing because, they are considered a public agency. So it doesn't open up the pool for any more agencies to apply. It's the definition that we were given, I believe is from another victim service guidance. So for the purposes of the purpose, it's the same thing. So no, this is not open to additional agencies. Nonprofit agencies are the applicable agencies for this funding.
Okay. My
Go ahead.
interpretation of a public agency is that it is a more of like a government agency, I guess, but I understand what you're saying, so.
We will relook at this, reclarify, and if we need to remove it, we will do that. But yeah, for the purposes, and this meeting is being recorded, nonprofit agencies are the only members that can apply for this funding.
Okay. And then the other part of the purpose statement I was wanted to get some information on was kind of where the, because in the previous two versions, it didn't state exclusively for shelter and shelter-related services. It was, at that time, it was primarily, neither of those really, again, are explicitly stated in the NRS, that it is so exclusively for shelter and shelter-related services. There in section 7A of 217.420, it does state that it is for that the nonprofits be able to provide shelter to victims, but that's it with the exception of the counties that are 100,000 or less in population or that are providing exclusively sexual violence services. So, I guess I have some concerns about the wording and the emphasis on shelter, because that also in section 7, shelter is just one component of many things. And so I was just not sure. It overall seems like there was a really big focus on shelter in all of the new documents. So.
Yeah, so on NRS 217.420, section 7, subsection A, it does say, except in counties whose population is 100,000, or if the organization provides services exclusively to victims of sexual violence. It says shelter to victims on any day at any hour. So the services that we are looking for is based on that, that the funding is exclusively for shelter and shelter-related services.
Yeah, I would just maybe personally, and I'm not trying to be, I just am reading it differently. I appreciate all the work you have all put into this. I think this is a huge undertaking, and it's been overdue that we really put these parameters around it. But I just have some concerns because I am reading that differently. The way that I would read it is be able to provide, and I see how you're reading it, but I think the comma to me is delineating that it's be able to provide shelter to victims on any day at any hour. The exclusively part is only referring to whether the agency is providing services exclusively to victims of sexual violence, then they do not have to provide shelter, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
that's my
we-
reading of it. And I just, I think that limiting it to exclusively providing shelter is not meeting the intent of the wording in the original NRS. So thank you.
Marlena, that is a very good, you're the way you're reading it and what it means to you. That's amazing to see that. We are going to go back and check and look at our historical data and find a definition of what this means, and then we'll come back and then explain that before we finalize the policy.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Appreciate your comments.
All right, thank you, Melina. We'll go ahead and put you back in
Do we
there.
have anybody?
We have another one, Kristen Kennedy.
Thank you. And I appreciate you looking into that. I just wanted to kind of, in addition to what Melina said, mention that in other under 7 in other bullet points or letters, it also, in addition to shelter, says counseling, legal, medical, psychological. So it's kind of listing all the services. And so with many domestic violence agencies, probably everybody on this call that delivers domestic violence, sexual assault services, counseling isn't just exclusive to shelter residents. So we have a lot of outreach clients that are just community members that come in for TPOs and that legal assistance, the counseling and that sort. So I think that was the intent. I don't want to, you already mentioned you would look into it, but I just wanted to make that point. So I appreciate you guys looking into that.
Yeah, we'll certainly look into the historical aspects of this and see if we can have a better definition. I know we use the definitions as it is stated on the NRS, and sometimes NRS isn't exactly how we have historically administered this program. So we'll certainly look into that, and we'll get back to you and the rest of the potential applicants with our revised statements before we post the NOFO. All right, it looks like Beth, we have a question from Beth.
I was just going to support the statements by the previous two that traditionally you have funded all staff from all of my programs, and the majority of my clients that I serve actually are through our advocacy program. A number of them are shelter, but a number of them are not shelter. So I can support that historically you have funded across programs, and that historically it's been stated that the agency just has to have a shelter, not that it only funds shelter. So I appreciate you looking into that for us. And I can show you all my past marriage license grants to show that it has funded other programs within the program as an agency in Clark County. Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to mention, I understand where this exclusively is bringing out the kind of like, hey, what are we doing? We are still funding what we used to fund. The funding categories and the funding services that we have been funding are still in this notice of funding opportunity. And as we will see later, they're also in the weighted scoring matrix. So I think that we, as well as we as a team, including our sub-grantees, we need to find a clear, what does exclusively mean? And, but we're not cutting any other services. So we're not saying we're only paying for shelter-related services and shelters. And nothing's changed. And we will see later in this presentation how we do account for counseling, how do we do account for other additional services that are rendered to victims in the shelter.
Absolutely. So again, we'll certainly look into refining that definition. As to reiterate what our chief has said, we do still fund those other programs that each and every one of you has been funded for. So this is not a elimination of those previously funded programs. This is more of a alignment of the definition that we'll certainly take a look at and realign to best match what has historically been funded, and of course what we aim to fund as we go on forward. All right.
Any other questions?
All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the next portion. All right, now we'll discuss the NOFO, which is the Notice of Funding Opportunity for the Aid to Victims of Domestic Violence and Sexual Violence Marriage License. The talking points that we'll discuss for this section, we're going to look into the award overview timeline, the opportunity summary, the funding details, eligibility, funding guidelines, post-award requirements, proposal narrative, shelter quality narrative, SOW instructions, and the budget narrative. This is the tentative timeline. Of course, most of this is grounded into NRS and will not change. So the grant opportunity will still be announced on March 1st, 2025. The questions and answers posted to our website will compile all the questions that you have submitted to us today, submitted in previously, and we'll provide that to you into our website at a later time, most likely by that stated deadline. Deadline for submission is again rooted in NRS. This will still be April 1st. At 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. The evaluation period, we aim to evaluate all submitted applications between April 7th to April 25th, and we'll announce the awards in May 2025. And of course, the performance period for this is FSEP-Y 2026, which is July 1st to June 30th, 2026.
Can I make a statement?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's me again. I do want to let you guys know that starting state fiscal 25, our grants management goal is to work hard to get to your NOSAs on time before July 1st. So your cooperation with submitting and providing us the information that we require is going to be extremely helpful for us to meet that deadline. So we really appreciate, when you get your notice award or your letter of award, intent of award, please let us know if you need any help from us. But the sooner we get your documentation, the sooner we can meet our goal. And really, we just want to make sure that July 1st, you're good to go. That's our goal.
Awesome. Thank you, Yara. All right, so the opportunity summary. Again, this supports programming for nonprofit and public agencies, which again is related to nonprofits, serving victims of domestic and sexual violence under NRS 217-400 to 27460. We will revise the second portion about the exclusively for shelter and shelter-related services. We encourage proposals that expand services and reach underserved communities across Nevada. Nevada is a vast state, and we have communities that are underserved, and we aim to serve those communities. Again, this funding opportunity is for SFY 2026, and the funding process combines application review and grant allocation by geographic regions administered by DCFS. Here are some details about the funding. Total available funding projected is $5.8 million. There's the performance period as well. Funding considerations, awards are determined based on the availability of funding along with your completion of grant requirements, scopes of work. Current subrecipients are not guaranteed funding in SFY 2026, and awards are granted through this NOFO do not ensure future funding. There is no match funds requirements for this grant. Couple guidelines. So this section on the NOFO talks about the definition of domestic violence, definition of victims of sexual assault and victims of sexual violence, victims of stalking, how funds are awarded on an SFY basis, and the funding is to provide services to victims of domestic and sexual activities. These activities, again, to calm some of you and give some reassurance, these activities are not inclusive, but do support shelter, hotline, food assistance for clients, counseling services, obtaining legal assistance or advocacy, medical care, outreach programs, psychological support or vocational assistance, and education and training for members of the community. Again, those services are still going to be funded by this grant opportunity. And of course, this section does speak about the applicant eligibility that we saw earlier. And this section also talks about the emerging trends, ensuring that we are all aware of these emerging trends, and of course, collaboration requirements and strategic considerations. This section also talks about how funding is allocated and distributed. Post-award requirements, so this is slightly new and different this year. The first part is your monthly financial status and request for reimbursement RFRs. We do require that you use our standardized Excel spreadsheets and that you submit all your RFRs by the 15th of the following month. RFRs and requests for reimbursements and monthly reports are still required even if you are not asking for reimbursement. This statement is new. Failure to submit timely reports will result in the withholding of requests for reimbursement. So please make sure we're also submitting those quarterly reports, as if we are forgetting those quarterly reports, your RFRs will be withheld. Subrecipient monitoring, we do ask that all applicants participate in our subrecipient monitoring system. This is intended to provide ongoing technical support to you and gather information from you, ensure that the grant is compliant. So we do ask that you participate in this. Quarterly performance reports. We are asking each and every one of you to complete program reports on a quarterly basis in our HAL platform. These quarterly reports are going to be due by the 15th of the following end of the reporting quarter. As you can see in the table below, each quarter is outlined as to what the reporting period we are asking for, as well as the due date for that reporting period. Again, failure to submit your quarterly performance reports will result in the withholding of your request for reimbursement. We do ask that the data that you provide in these reports are supported through source documentation and that the data you submit is only for this funding opportunity. That means data you enter into the system is for the information regarding this funding. These are the same, of course, compliance with changes to federal and state laws, updating your information on the Nevada 211 program, and participation in the Nevada Confidential Address Program. This one is new for this year, compliance with the DCFS grievance process. We will be providing you with this process as soon as you are awarded, but the process will include the following: direct communication with your organization, speaking to a staff member or a program director, escalation of issues to executive leadership, escalation of issues to the directors of the board for your organization. And after all of those have been exhausted, clients are more than welcome to go through the DCFS grievance procedure, or they may choose to go through the DCFS procedure at any time. Client satisfaction surveys, this is new this year, so client satisfaction surveys will be required. These surveys are going to be completely anonymous. Participation in these surveys will give us an opportunity for you to showcase your impact, enhance the services that you offer, and of course, assist us with identifying technical opportunities. And client satisfaction surveys will also take part in the weight scoring matrix for counties over 100,000 in population. We will be utilizing the improved system this year. We will provide you the information into creating your Improve account so you're able to familiarize yourself with the Improve platform. We did send out a link to the user guide on the NOFO. We established some survey requirements in here, as well as usage reporting, the administration and confidentiality of the survey, of course, anonymity, and the goals and the benefits of the survey. Yes.
Quick question, I have to add, I need to add something to the section. Improved system, we've talked about it last year. We are trying to find a way where we can collect data across the state and data that can be compared to other states in a much bigger picture. I know that there are some agencies who have some questions or concerns about Improve. Right now, our plan is to incorporate Improve into our processes. However, everything's going to be done as a team. So we will be hosting a Q&A, questions and answers with Improve to make sure that this is what Nevada needs and that it fits the population that we service. I know that I've gotten some emails saying I'm not sure that this is what works for my agency. So just know that we have it in the NOFO as part of the requirement, but we can always, if later we decide it's not what Nevada, it's going to work with Nevada, we can always opt it out. We have to put it because right now that's the plan, but we may change it along the way. So nothing is set on stone. I just want you guys to know that we are pushing to try to have a more concise process so that we can all gather the same information. But you will get more invitations and more information about this when we are ready to provide that.
Thank you, Yara. Of course, national shelter standards, we do require that you adhere to national shelter standards and best practices. We will be providing these standards and guidelines upon award. So this will be a new factor into our grant process this year. Programmatic and financial standards. This is also new. All successful applicants must adhere to our GERS, follow best practices in financial management, program oversight, reporting, and effective and compliant use of funding. So these are some of the requirements that we are going to adhere to and have all of our funded agencies adhere to. Failure to comply with these programmatic and financial standards may impact current and future funding eligibility. This could include up to rescission of funding. Proposal narrative on the application. So the narrative should not exceed 10 pages. This section details the proposal that you submit to us. This section has 7 sections. We'll go through each and every one of them briefly. I do want to also note that responses to this section should be for this funding opportunity. I know we have multiple different funding opportunities for victim services, but any responses in these sections should be specifically for this funding opportunity. The first part is the proposal narrative. These are the questions that you'll be asked to respond to. Statement of need, here are the questions that you will be required to respond to. Services proposed, this one is lengthy, so this is worth a lot more points and we have a lot more questions for you. Evidence-based programs and practices, these will be asked for this funding for this year. Availability and accessibility of services, here are the questions that will be asked. Goals and objectives, here are the goals and objectives for your organization. This is where you'll be describing them. The methods of accomplishment for your goals and objectives, this is where you will describe those. Community coordination and collaboration, this is the section where you will respond and provide us with the information regarding that. This one is new this year. This is the shelter quality narrative. This section should detail activities in regard to shelter quality as it relates to this funding. I know some organizations do not explicitly offer shelter services and contract or have a memorandum of understanding with other agencies. So if your organization does not directly administer shelters, the responses to this section should be about the agency that you contract with. And of course, for applicants in counties with more than 100,000 in population, this will be a factor in the weight scoring matrix. These are the questions about the shelter quality narrative that we ask. And this is a scoring rubric for the shelter quality narrative. The scope of work is slightly different this year. So it looks like this. We aim to ask for additional information. So this is what it'll look like this year. So some best practices with your SOW, make sure that it aligns with the grant purpose, make goals measurable, ensure that your SOW is attainable, make the SOW reportable. And of course, we will revisit this last part, prioritize shelter and shelter-related services. We'll revisit that section. Budget narrative. This is the budget narrative requirements. It's similar to last year, but we did add additional parts in here. So on the budget division, part 1 is the budget requested for organization-wide activities, and part 2 is funds for shelter operations and shelter-related services. These are the proposed budget narrative instructions. So proposed budget instructions and budget narrative instructions. This is how the budget narrative looks like. Again, this is split into two. The first part is the part for the organization-wide funding request, and the second part is for shelter and shelter-related activities request. More of that. All right, we will take some time to answer questions you have regarding the NOFO. So if you have questions, please raise your hand. All right, we got a couple questions. So it looks like Elizabeth has a question. So let me go ahead and unmute you.
Hi, thank you. I have
Hi.
a few questions, so I'm gonna try to do them in the order that they are in the NOFO, but it's hard. I would just also put out there that we would appreciate being able to print these documents. It can be really hard for many of us to review it on the screen and try to have 8 million screens open at the same time. So I'll just put that out there. The first is when we get to programmatic scoring, I am not seeing scoring for the sexual assault side, and I'm really only seeing shelter scoring, as was already sort of noted. So I'm just wondering about that, if there is a programmatic section for sexual assault. in that way, and also how we are going to weight some of those other services outside of shelter.
Yeah, so as far as the documents goes, they are intentionally protected since these are draft. That's why you're not able to print them or copy them. Once we have the full NOFO released, you will be able to print them. As far as the weight scoring matrix, we will be going over that portion after this section.
Okay, then maybe I'll wait and hold my questions for then, because I think most of my questions are around the weighting.
Yes,
Thank you.
of course. Thank you, Elizabeth. All right, Melina.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, so the slide about the quarterly performance reports mentions that the reporting will now just be related or based on the services that receive marriage license funding. Is that true, that in the past we were able to report on all services provided on these quarterly reports? And I would just, I guess, sort of an overarching kind of concern I have about some of the changes in wording and focus, and even kind of with the matrix stuff, is just that this funding is, you know, really for all services provided and not just shelter. And we as organizations have always been able to use it to fund the type of administrative needs and other things that the more restricted federal grants won't fund. And I just, that plays into how this could make quarterly reports more challenging, because if I'm using the funding to, the marriage license funding to support our development manager, how do I quantify that in a quarterly report on service numbers?
Yeah, so as far as the quarterly reports, each funded program we have here at DCFS will have its own quarterly report. So this quarterly report is specifically for marriage license. That's why we are requesting for service numbers specifically for marriage license. As far as other programs, again, as we mentioned earlier, you can still provide the same programs and services as you did before. We're just expressively asking for more into the services itself. I know this funding is used for a lot of different activities, but we want to try to see a little bit more into the services that we are funding. So again, these services are not going to go away. You are still more than welcome to provide funding using this funding to those services, but we are heavily relying on services itself rather than administrative.
Yeah, and I would just maybe then say if you could consider, because we have always reported on services, all of our services though, not just, you know, if we're being asked to just report on a percentage of services, I understand that, but the, you know, this is a shift for us, one, and I guess two, there might be some need to help us to clarify how we would segment services for marriage license funding based on how we are budgeting the use of the funds. So
let me speak to that. No, we are taking your, you know, your questions. We are going to have to be talking about reporting. We are going to have to be able to separate actual time worked with actual marriage license time and hours. We are not changing what you apply for. We are not saying you can no longer do one thing. When it comes to the reporting and what we are making changes, this is not like you have to do it as we say. We're going to sit down and have conversations. And I understand that marriage license is a state fund and it's used for other things that regular federal grants don't. What we are asked and tasked with is we need to create this policy, and we need to create a fair and weighted score to account for the decisions that are made. As we know, marriage license is is important for all agencies. So I'm taking your consideration. We'll probably have a call if it's okay with you so that we can discuss this. We'll put all your questions in the Q&A and answers, but you're bringing really good questions. Like maybe on our end, we need to just sit down and kind of back away a little and see how we are going to collect the data. But yes, reporting training is going to be provided. We need to make sure that we're accounting. The same emphasis we're putting on our federal grants reporting is going to have to transfer into our state funding reporting. So there will be more conversations when it comes to marriage license reporting. But in terms of what you guys have previously historically applied for, it's not changing at all.
Right.
Anyone else?
We have Beth.
Hi, yeah, I was gonna say the same thing as Melina, so I'm glad you're looking into that. And then I was wondering if you could send us exactly what you're looking for our demographics for our board.
They are on the NRS, but we can certainly send you the specifics as required on the NRS.
All right, thank you.
Okay, can you read it?
It said, shouldn't you give us the standards prior to the award so they can be included in our application as required? That's the shelter standards.
That's an amazing suggestion. Okay. And we will not have them ready. We are not going to ding you for not addressing, we're hoping that every shelter has standards. I know a lot of you have standards because you guys are part of the coalition and they have their standards. And we have copies of those standards. So I wish I could tell you that, yes, we have them ready and finalized. They are in review process right now. So we are hoping that we expect that you indicate your shelter standards. There's not a right or wrong answer. We want standards and we need to be following them. When we come up with our standards, we will also have meetings with you guys to go over what we have identified, and we're going to discuss this. Our goal, and I said that when I first started, we're not imposing any rules without you knowing and having a room and a time to communicate your thoughts and your feedback. So right now, I know that all of you have standards, so just include your standards, and then we will definitely meet again and kind of go over what we are hoping to implement, and then we'll move from there. So we don't have them finalized. And before we have them finalized to even present to you guys, it's going to take at least a few weeks.
Angela?
Hi, just a really quick question in regards to the satisfaction surveys. Is there a metric to the amount of surveys that you all would be requiring in terms of like funding amount, shelter size, whatever that may be, including the approved system? Are there certain metrics? Are those as well being worked out? And then we'll get that information once it's been completed and approved by the team.
Yes, we're certainly still working on those standards as well. As far as the client satisfaction surveys, you may administer them at any time to the clients that you have. The client satisfaction surveys is not only for marriage license, it'll be used for our other victim service surveys. So you will have the opportunity to be able to collect data on those other funding opportunities as well. And we will have access to the data from our partners at Improve. So we'll be able to see your data in real time, be able to work with you in improving the data, and for you to be able to understand what the data means.
Sure. So as of right now, there are no metric in regards to the amount of surveys in working in shelter. As we know, we have clients that leave in the middle of the night for whatever reason. They move on and move out. So the odds of getting a specific percentage kind of would be important for us to know as agencies as well, to ensure our staff is offering the ability to, complete a survey in a timely fashion. So that's why I was just wondering.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there is currently no specific quota to meet for the amount of surveys that you need to request for. Again, these surveys will purely be for us to be able to understand what's going on, how we can work together to improve services, and how we can formulate a plan to move Nevada forward.
Yeah, so as some agencies have their own, obviously, protocols and stuff for surveys, but we're looking through Improve, and I heard that we're gonna have an ability to have a conversation in regards to that system, correct?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll send up a follow-up email to an invitation for a session with the improved team, so you can meet them as well and be able to ask your questions to the team and have them answered by the improved team.
Right, because previously this was something that was offered quite a few years ago, right? And then that wasn't implemented, and now we're trying this again, or is this because we haven't been using this along the way? Correct me if I'm wrong.
No
Yes.
one is.
Okay,
Yeah, no one is. We learned, Carla and I traveled to our Boca conference, and they presented, and it seems like a really nice tool to have, that we can compare our progress and the great work we're doing in Nevada with other states. We have met with them multiple times. They're talking about the access to every agency would have an access to their own agencies. You guys can put the data there. You guys have a desk, your own page. You can go in, sort, print, move. You can have your own, your own information for your own records, for your reporting, for your applications. We would have access to see that as well as statewide. So it is a conversation. It looks amazing. However, on our end, we are thinking everything is easy to implement, and you guys are the ones that are dealing with the real work. So there will be conversations, there will be meetings before we implement, because we want to make it, we want to compete with other states. However, we want to make sure that our staff can do that, and that the agencies can do that, and it sits well with Nevada. So yes, now no one's using it right now. We are not even using it. We're not accessing it. We're not taking that into consideration. That's a future plan, hoping that it fits our state.
perfect. Thank you for clarification.
Yeah.
Can you look at it? Any other questions?
We have Alyssa. We'll take Alyssa as our last question for this section. Alyssa?
Thanks. Yes, just again about the surveys, it just seems like, according to the NOFO, the surveys are a part of the scoring process. And so I'm unsure, looking at the application, if we are supposed to submit surveys with our application.
What agency are you from?
Domestic Violence Resource Center.
Okay, yeah, so the weight scoring matrix is again only for counties with a population of 100,000 or more. So for counties that are not 100,000 or more, you will not be subject to the weight scoring matrix.
So actually, I am in Washoe County.
Oh, sorry, my bad. All I have is Clark County ones. Yes, so you will be subjected if your county has a population of 100,000 or more, but we will explain the weight scoring matrix here in a moment.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
My apologies for that. I had assumed it was AEDB for a moment. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the weight scoring matrix section. All right, so the weight scoring matrix, this is the part where we talked about earlier about how we have programmatic scoring factors, service number scoring factors, how we calculate the funding distribution, and we also have an example of how this system works. So again, the weight scoring matrix is a funding distribution for counties with populations over 100,000. This is how we determine the funding distribution between two agencies that provide domestic violence or sexual assault services within the county. The weight scoring matrix is divided into programmatic scoring, which is 40%, and service number scoring, which is 60%. This ensures that we have a fair and data-driven distribution of the funds. Again, fair distribution, data-driven and structured, recognizes agency effectiveness and service impact on survivors. There are two scoring methods for the weight scoring matrix. Proportional scoring, which is where your agency will share the total points based on the proportion of the total. So two agencies will share the score. And absolute scoring, which is where the agency keeps the points that they earn based on their own performance without sharing points with others.
That's a very important point I want to make. There are sections in the scoring that we are not sharing, or we are not comparing to other agencies. It's not a fair comparison. So there's some parts that are comparison and some parts that are not. So it is very important that you understand this.
Yeah, and we'll discuss and go over these sections as well. So programmatic scoring, which is 40%, these assesses key operational factors like shelter capacity, shelter quality, budget efficiency, client feedback. Our objective is to ensure that agencies maintain effective operations, financial responsibility, and high service standards. This is the weight scoring matrix for both sexual violence and domestic violence. Again, this is a programmatic section. We'll discuss each part here in the next slides. Shelter capacity. So this is the total number of beds provided by an agency for your shelter services. Each agency will report their shelter capacity through the application. And this is one of the ones where total score is divided amongst the two agencies. So for example, agency A has 50 beds, agency B has 60 beds. Total capacity for both agencies is 110 beds. So agency A, the score will be their 50 beds divided by the total of 110 beds, which will give you 3.64 points. Agency B has slightly higher beds, so it'll be the 60 beds divided by the 110 total beds, which will provide 4.36 points out of a total of 8 points. The next portion, this is one where you don't share the points. This is shelter amenities and quality. So these are based on main amenities, which are 6 points. These are the criteria that are defined in the NRS, like telephone availability, food storage and preparation, and shelter confidentiality. Again, your agency will receive full points, and since this is a requirement by NRS, each agency will receive the full 6 points for this. And we have additional amenities. These amenities are related to the first three, but provide half a point for each if your agency provides this. So transportation assistance, meals provided, laundry services, computers and online access, support groups, and basic medical services. Each agency will receive half a point if your agency provides this, and agencies will keep their half point for themselves. There is no sharing of points on this portion. Quality narrative, which is worth 3 points. Each agency will be required to submit a quality narrative as part of your application. So while the quality narrative also has its own scoring points for the application matrix, for counties over 100,000, we also use your quality narrative to provide you a score for the programmatic section of the weight scoring matrix. So every 5 points you receive in the application scoring will land you 1 point in the programmatic scoring. Client feedback. This is aggregated feedback based on your satisfaction surveys or similar evaluations. This is, again, one of those where you don't share the points. You keep the points that your agency receives. So, for example, if you have an average survey score of 4.2 out of 5, you'll receive 8.4 points, and you'll keep those points for yourself. You don't share those points with another agency. Now, if you had a 5.0 score, you of course will receive all 10 points. So this is again dependent on your client satisfaction surveys. Budget. Budget evaluation is going to be based on the proportion of an agency's requested funding relative to the total funding requested by all agencies. So this is one of the ones where you share your points across the other agencies. So personnel, this is going to be one of the ones again where you share the points. So for example, agency A has personnel of $50,000. Agency B has personnel of $30,000. We combine both of them for the total of 80,000. So agency A score, you'll receive 0.75 points. And agencies B score will receive 1.25 points. We divide the score out of the total to come up with. Operating. Operating, we use this to calculate your operating amount. This is another one of those where you share the points. So for example, if agency A is requesting 40,000 in operating and agency B is requesting 60,000 in operating, we of course add up all the totals to 100,000. Agency A will receive 1.6 points and agency B will receive 2.4 points based on the amount that you have requested. Services, of course, again, this is another one of the ones that you share the points with. We calculate the total of all the services amount. So for example, if agency A services is 25,000 and agency B is 75,000, we again add up the totals. Agency A will receive 1 point and agency B will receive 3 points. This is the service number scoring. This is based on the individuals that your agency served. We look at data from quarters 1, 2, 3 of the previous state fiscal year's quarterly reports. These are new individual served, victim compensation, application assistance, and service categories. So these are the categories we look into: information referral, personal advocacy and accompaniment, emotional support or safety services, shelter and housing services, criminal and civil justice system. So the service numbers will represent the total number of victims you served and the number of services you provided to the victims in those 6 categories. Shelter and housing service data, this one is worth 10 points, but we divide it into 2. We divide into 2 separate categories, emergency bed nights, which is worth 3 points, and bed nights, which is worth 7 points. We calculate this using the total of the amount that each agency has provided. So for example, we have total emergency bed nights of 5,000, which is reported for the 2 counties with more than 100K. Agency A reports 1,000 emergency bed nights, whereas agency B reports 4,000 emergency bed nights. Agency A will get 1.8 points. Agency B gets 7.2 points for providing more bed nights. And these are the other service number score factors that we have. These are the other categories. Again, emotional support or safety services, personal advocacy or accompaniment, information and referral services, criminal or civil justice system, public presentations, and community education. So each one of those will be worth 10 points. Similar calculation, we calculate using the total. So for example, let's say we had total emotional support services. Both agencies provided 15,000 emotional support services. Agency A reported 12,000. Agency B reported 3,000. Agency A will get 7.2 points for providing more services, and agency B receives 1.8 points. This is how we calculate the funding distribution. We first identify the total funding allocation. So in this example, it's $1 million. We add up each agency's total score. We calculate this by summing up all the scores that you have earned in the weight scoring matrix. Then we calculate the total scores across all agencies. So we add up both of the scores, 111.7 in this case. And then in step 4, we determine each agency's percentage of the total. So we take the points divided by the total points to equal it out of 100%. That's how we will determine the funding distributions. and they represent the proportion of the total funding that each agency will receive. And we convert those percentages to decimals, then apply it to the percentages of the funding. So agency A, for their 41.76% will get 417,000. Agency B, with their 58.24%, they'll receive 582,000. And of course, we verify the total to make sure that it totals out of the entire budget. This method divides the funding proportionally based on agencies' assigned percentage, and we will be able to ensure fairness and transparency in the distribution process. So here is an example of a weight scoring matrix between agency A and agency B. Agency A has 62 beds in their shelter. Agency B has 48. Each agency was able to provide all the amenities and additional amenities, was able to submit shelter narratives and scored well on those shelter narratives. One agency had a 4.40, I believe, let me check to make sure. 4.40 on their client feedbacks, and another had 4.50. And that's total out of 5 points. So you see all the points that are awarded out of 10. And then we have the budget. We entered the budgets for each agency that they provided. Totaling for programmatic, agency A received 30.47 points, and agency B received 29.33 points. Then we go into the service number scoring, which is the 60%. We take all the numbers that the data provided for us in HAL for the last 3 quarters. We entered that in there, and each agency will have their points taken with another agency's points and shared. So agency A, on this case, they provided more services. They received 32.49 points. Agency B received 27.51 points. We put the total of the agency scores. So agency A got 62.96 points. Agency B got 56.84 points. Then we take those points and divide it to make sure it's out of 100%. So agency A is 52.55% of the total scores. Agency B is 47.45. So agency A will receive $1.4 million in funding, and agency B will receive $1.2 million in funding. All right, we'll have a brief questions and answers session. All right, Melina.
Sorry, me again, talking a lot. Yeah, I just wanted to point out that kind of going back to the quarterly reports in the previous section, if you're asking us to report on data for just marriage license funding, then when we get to this point of reporting service numbers for scoring, it's going to be impacted because we're basing that on a certain funding amount and not 100% of our services. So there wouldn't ever be an opportunity, it feels like, then for our funding level to change. I'm not sure if I'm stating this in a clear way, but you wouldn't be really comparing apples to apples in that sense if you have 2 DV organizations, but one year one of them received less funding for whatever reason than the other. If our quarterly reports are based on the amount of funding we receive from marriage license, and then that's what you're using to score the next year's funding, it would impact that. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah,
and if that doesn't make sense, I can.
Yeah, so again, the quarterly reports will be based on the data you provide for marriage license. So if you're providing the services and you have the services for marriage license, your quarterly report should not decrease. It should still remain roughly the same if it's going to be for the same services, just for marriage license. And this goes for all the agencies with over 100,000 populations. So if your agency is still providing those services and it is for marriage license, and you are providing more of those services than the other agency, you will still receive funding and you will score higher if you provide more services.
Let me answer that too, add to what Zylan has included. I understand that the quarterly report is something that we need to look separately. If we know that all sub-grantees have additional services that are being delivered in the shelter, the way we have been using this funding or the way that we currently use this funding per agencies may be different, but at no point are we going to say, oops, your reports don't show it. If right now we have been taking, in the past, we've taken 100% of the numbers that you've been receiving, we are not here to say, oh, because of this application, we're not going to count for that. We understand that changes are going to come with changes on your end, but please know that we don't expect for this to be a tool to eliminate providing services or to eliminate providing funding. I do get the question for the reporting, and I think I didn't put much thought to it until now. So I am with you, Melina, and I think that we do need to have a conversation outside this meeting to go over the reporting. But please know, if you guys, if the agents come back and say, wait, Yara, we were able to do this in the past, and we were reporting this number, then this is not to harm you. It's only to have a clear and concise way in our policy that we can continue to use moving forward years in the future years. So this conversation is really identifying what our next focus will be, which is one, to answer all the questions that you guys have on this matrix and on this NOFO. Two, to regroup and come back as a team and say, okay, how are we going to report and how is the fair way for us to report? And three is just making sure that we understand, finalize, and that, again, we are not here to say, oh, all of a sudden you guys are not eligible. We want to continue to provide the services that you guys are providing, and we are here to support you guys. We just want to make it clear and concise in our policies that moving forward every year, this is how we're going to do it, and it works for all of us. So we will be scheduling another follow-up appointment. Melina, I will definitely meet with you personally so that I can make sure that I understand, what needs to be addressed. And I know that this is for everybody. So all the questions that are going out to one person are going to go to everybody.
Thank you. And I do want to say, I would not expect that you all could come up with every single scenario and how this might all play up, and appreciate that you're putting the work into, again, trying to figure it out. I think we just have to bring up the questions because it's part of our process of making sure we understand it, but also to make sure that it is the right blend. And so I'd love to be able to better explain that, because I don't think I did very well. So after this on another line, thank you.
No worries. And again, our job is not to eliminate funding or reduce funding. Our job is to continue to support. If we can provide more funding, we will. We just want to have a concise, clear way to do it and account for all the services that you guys do. Because I also feel that we are missing all the extra work and all the efforts that you guys are putting when you do the daily job of shelters or victims or providing services. So yes, this is going to open up more conversations. We just need to clear marriage license, clear the policy, clear the scoring, and be able to move on. And you guys need to have the peace of mind that this is not going to be happening every year. Because I sense the stress. I am stressed. So it's just a matter of being able to provide clear and concise information, transparency. So yes, this is going to open up more work for both of us. So we're ready. Let's take this challenge. We'll make it happen. Anyone else?
All right, Kristen.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate your positivity and your attitude. Thank you. I did have a question. So since domestic violence and sexual assault are two separate buckets of funding, how do you anticipate utilizing the shared point system for, you know, when you have like just a DV agency and then you have a DV-SA agency? So when there are two separate funding buckets.
That is a very good question. And I started typing your answer in Teams, but I'm like, no, she's going to speak and I'm going to. So that's a very good question. To be very honest, I don't know that we looked into it. But if we are trying to be fair with the weighted score calculation, we're going to have to be fair with the comparisons as well. So I can only assume that we are going to go back to the drawing board and come back with a explanation, a note, something that says agencies have to be, for those compared scores, right? Only for the shared scores, agencies have to be shared and compared with same agencies, so same services. So love your question. This is why we have this meeting.
Yes, I do want to add that the data for the service number section will be for the same service. So again, like we mentioned earlier, the quarterly reporting is divided into two sections, one for domestic violence and one for sexual violence. So all the data in that section will specifically only be for sexual violence. So if an agency is also doing DV and SV, we will only be looking at the specific portions of that agency's information as it relates to sexual violence. So if they have other data that is not for sexual violence, that's not going to be counted in that section down there at the bottom. So same exact. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that a simple example though is just looking at shelter beds, so shelter beds, is that going to be divided then? Beds for DV, beds for SA, you know what I mean? So I think we can have more conversation around it, but.
Yeah, I think that's going to open up more conversation but good observation, good question.
All right, that's the last question for that part. We'll go ahead and quickly go over the application process. We're almost there to the end.
Anybody, but I think we have some questions on the chat.
Oh, we do. Okay, let's see.
Carla, can you?
Oh, the chat.
Yes.
Director said, I must have missed the NRS spelling. Oh, sorry. So the formula for the funding and population is part of that formula. And so that is an NRS 217.450, if you wanted to read that. Secondary question was?
It says, why didn't you give points for staff longevity? From director. We don't consider staff longevity. I believe our approach for staff wages is due to NRS. Somebody help me. NRS, the low cost.
Oh.
The section that indicates services at a lower cost.
Yes, NRS 217-450 subsection 2, the administrator of the division shall give priority to those applications for grants from the account for aid for victims of violence or sexual violence submitted by organizations which offer the broadest range of services for the least cost in one or more counties.
Now, I do have, we have received some questions on, some people feel that we are dictating the wage of your direct staff. Please know we are not dictating the wage. We believe that I just did a few visits to the shelters and I gained so much more, oh my God, love for the field. We believe that your direct staff should be receiving the highest pay you possibly can. They deserve it. So we are not dictating how much you can pay or not pay. We do have that NRS that says lowest cost, but just for those agencies that also have higher cost in operation, we are considering the higher cost. So if we say you're scoring lower if your staff, staff cost, we also have that opportunity where if your operating cost is high, we're giving you scores for that. So it's a weighted score. Please look at the entire calculation, play it yourself, do your own calculations, look at it. we're not saying low for here, low for here. We also acknowledge that, Clark County, Washoe County has a higher cost of living compared to the rurals. Not much by now, but, so please look at the entire thing, play with it, and let us know. But we do have some pending questions that we're going to be sending out along with all the questions we received today. So that's why we're not looking at longevity. We are looking at, we're trying to address that NRS by accounting for that, but still, it is a weighted score.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
what's the next question?
Will you make these formulas available to the agencies?
They're including the NOFO on the draft that you guys got. And yes, of course, they are going to be included in the final NOFO. They are also going to be going up on the website. We are creating a marriage license website where you can find eventually information on the grant, who can apply, and all that information, as well as who's eligible, who received funding during this year, along with the link for reporting and our weighted scores.
Yes, and I do want to add that in the presentation itself, we did provide how these are scored, the scoring method. So that is the formula that we use to score that specific portion. That is included in the presentation, which has been attached onto the chat. We will also be sending out the presentation later, so you have the ability to revisit these formulas at a later time.
Then we had a comment.
Mhm.
The only challenge is that in Clark County, both agencies serve the entire area. I have many clients from Vegas and North Las Vegas, though I am located in Henderson.
We, like I said, I was in Las Vegas visiting some partners, and I learned a lot. I learned about some MOUs that are happening. I learned a lot about, so all of those things are going to have to be considered when we are looking at Clark County, Washoe, whichever county has this issue. We're not sold on, we have to adapt GMU. So if our matrix needs to be revisited, because it seems like it needs to be revisited after answering these questions. We're going to look at that. We can have follow-up meetings. We can have one-on-ones. If you want us to present to your staff we can do this. The only thing we cannot do is hold the NOFO. The NOFO will go out March 1st. If any changes on the process that we're going to be implementing, the scoring, anything happens throughout the time that you guys are applying, you guys will be clearly informed. We are going to have clear communication on what we're doing, and you guys will be part of the conversations. We are not surprising you guys. This is not us against you guys. This is we all have to make this happen and make it happen in a way that it's a fair and concise way.
And then the last question here that we haven't responded to is, who do we send our additional questions to?
You can go ahead.
You can send them directly to me or the team. I will be compiling all the questions and we'll be working with the team to respond to all of your questions. I do ask that each and every one of you, if you have communication regarding this funding opportunity, that you also add me into the conversation. That way we ensure that these conversations are responded to in a timely manner and that the whole team has the information. Again, I am the point of contact for this funding opportunity, so it's very, very important that we're also including me in the conversation so we can address your concerns.
Another question from Melissa for time. Who do we send our additional questions? That's been answered. Okay, I think we got all of them. Okay, let's quickly go over what are we doing, the application?
Yeah, so we're gonna go through the application process quickly here. This is also outlined in the NOFO, so you have all the same information. So we're gonna go over application review, the evaluation process, the application form, the agency self-assessment, past performance with GMU, the application scoring matrix itself, and the submission instructions.
The application is pretty much self-explanatory. You will find, again, the headings on what we are asking you to narrate. We're giving you also the possible points. And if you have any questions on what we have in this application, because it's already 12:40 and I know people have to go, please let us know. We do have the evidence-based question. That's a new question. It is not a requirement that marriage license follows an evidence base. I know that the state and the federal government is moving towards evidence-based practices. If the funding that you are requesting goes to any programming, we would like to know what you are using, and we would like to know if it's evidence-based. Not applicable also works, but you will be seeing evidence-based questions in all of our NOFOs, including FIPSA and BOCA.
Yes, so we'll go through the next part in here. So this is application review. This is the evaluation process. Applications are due on April 1st, and these are the steps that we take on the application process. So we'll go through this. And these are the final decision steps. This is how we will notify you in May 2025 with a letter of intent. We'll also work with you if we need to make adjustments to your project budget, scope of work, or enact any special conditions. This is the first part of the application form. It has the evidence-based services part again that we mentioned. You can put yes, no, or not available. This is page 1 of the application form. Agency self-assessment, complete and submit the self-assessment questionnaire for your organization. We did slightly adjust the form to make it a little bit more user-friendly. The past performance with GMU, this is a score that will be scored internally by GMU. You should be submitting your most recent single audit or financial opinion with your application.
Please make sure that we do that. We have in the past, we don't get those full documents. We are kind of semi-fully staffed, so we will be checking at every element that is submitted. So please pay attention to the requirements.
This is the application scoring matrix. This is for the entire application as a whole. This is the application scoring matrix scores. This is the maximum points to be awarded for all the sections in the application, 230 points. Here's the submission instructions. Again, the grant deadline is 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Tuesday, April 1st. You need to submit the signed and completed application form, the scope of work, the project budget narrative. Submit these to the email listed in there. If you do not receive a response after you submitted the email within 3 business days, you can go ahead and send me an email or contact me directly. If you have an issue with submitting or you want to submit it by paper, you can submit it and postmark it by April 1st. You can submit it directly to me. There's my address. And this is a little bit better version of that. All right. Does anyone have any questions about the application submission process itself? All right, seeing none. And lastly, we want to leave you off with our GMU contact information. This is the contact information for each one of the team members you see behind me. And of course, my contact information is there. I am, again, the aid to victims of domestic violence and sexual violence point of contact. Michaela Tran over here is going to be our victims of crime VOCA point of contact. So I put her information in there as well, because some of you do have VOCA as well. And there's our website on the bottom.
I want to thank every single one of you for attending, and for those who had to go, we are very grateful to see this participation. We never doubt that a marriage license responds to any of our meetings to discuss any policies or changes. We are, like I said, semi-fully staffed, and we are more than happy to work with you guys to address any unanswered questions or concerns.
Yes, again, thank you so much for attending today. If you do have any follow-up questions or if you'd like to schedule some time to discuss with us individually, please feel free to contact us and make sure you include me in that discussion so that we can get to your questions and respond as quickly as possible. Thank you again for spending the afternoon and morning with us. We really appreciate your feedback that you have provided us. We'll certainly take each feedback we receive into advisement, and we'll return back to you with our updated information. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, meeting chat, okay. MS, what's the MS? I think it's agenda, okay. Live, one person, chat, more, call, okay, and meeting. Attendees will see messages in the meeting and the organizer presenters remain in the green room. Okay, now I want me in the meeting in the green room.